Hello, everyone, and welcome to day number 4. We are very excited to welcome Jeff McElvenna again. I know that you have enjoyed his previous workshops, and today we're going to be talking a little bit of teaching with limited resources. We all know that we are going through a very difficult time with this pandemic. My name is Monica Leon, and I will be here as your liaison. So if you want to comment or use our YouTube channel a comment section, I can read them for you. So Jeff, thank you for being here again, and we are very sure that you're going to delight us with today's workshop. So welcome and welcome everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, this is an interesting topic. It's one that's important for us since we all have students who are scattered about. So let's get into it. But first, I wanted to remind you all to connect with us on WhatsApp. They're going to put the link in the YouTube comments. But if you have a QR scanner on your phone, or you just go up and put your camera up to this QR code, you should be able to add it, and that way we can stay connected after the week is done. If you have further questions or suggestions or resources, we can always put them on there. And I also want to show you a few things later on the WhatsApp group, not on the webinar here, but on the WhatsApp group, about how to toggle the settings and some other things that I talked about yesterday. So do remember to join that if you're interested. Everyone's welcome there. I always enjoy connecting. That's why I freely give you guys my WhatsApp info here for the workshop, my social media, LinkedIn, all of that. I'm a big believer in communities of practice and helping each other. So please join us. So let me start with another statistic like I always do. So this is one from UNICEF that 66%, that's 2/3 of the world's school age children, have no internet access at home. This is a huge number, of course, and it's something that I think we all kind of knew that this was an issue for a lot of people, but the pandemic has really shown us this even more so. We've had so many issues connecting with students and making sure everyone is able to get on and connect and stay in touch with their class and with their teachers. So just so you understand, we're not alone. You're not alone. Um, since we are able to teach online, if you're in this webinar, I assume you're at least interested in teaching online. If you're not teaching online yet, um, hopefully that means most of our students are able to access the internet in some way. But particularly in Latin America, at least in my experience there, it's a lot of mobile phone access to the internet, less, the brand new computer at home with broadband internet. So this is something that I think we're all aware of as teachers, but something to keep in mind when we're planning. So that's something we're going to talk about today. So the topics I want to talk about with limited technology and resources are about both the technology side and how to deal with that, but also when we don't have resources that aren't technological. For example, some of us might have or might not have books and might not have the same resource library that we're used to having at our schools or in our offices. So just some things to think about. Number one, we're going to talk about access modalities and options. I'll explain what I mean by that, but it's important first to understand how our students are accessing the internet, how they're accessing the resources that we give them. We'll talk about free learning management systems. We won't go in depth with this, of course, because we did a whole webinar about this on Tuesday, but I do want to talk about and suggest some of the free ones and why that's an important choice for you looking forward. Low bandwidth options, how to differentiate your instructions, teacher created curricula and sourcing. A lot of you have probably experienced this over the last year where maybe your students, when you immediately switched to online learning, they had the resources, they had the textbooks. You could kind of take what you were doing in class and move it online, maybe if we were lucky. But then suddenly those students are out and we're all trying something new. So just to keep that in mind. And finally, we'll talk about the importance of routine and flexibility. So to start off, I do want to start with a poll like we've been doing all week. This is a way to engage everyone, to make sure everyone's being heard and that you're interacting with the webinar so you're not just watching it. Although I know a lot of you are watching after the fact. So if you're watching after the fact, you'll only be able to see the last poll that we do. But you're always welcome to join it as well. But for today, if you will, just go to pollev.com. That's short for Poll Everywhere, pollev.com/poll pace. And our first poll is asking you how your students primarily access their online classes. So I imagine a lot of us will have students who use mobile phone data, but just I kind of want to know what the primary access is when they log into your classes. What are they usually on? So Monica, I know we're early now, but are there any comments yet
Well,
as we're
not so
waiting to
far. The
start?
people are saying hi and that they are very excited to be here. It's awesome that after 4 days, they are still here and they are very active. So remember that you can always use the YouTube comment section. I'll try to review your questions and pass them on to Jeff. Well, so far we don't have any comments, but if we do, I'll let you know.
All right, good, good. So we see the poll results coming in. It looks like it's kind of split mostly between mobile phones and home computers. And I think that's probably true even here where I am in New York. We definitely have students who don't have computers. They assumed they would be, if they needed a big computer or a laptop, they could use the ones on campus or at the school or at the university. And of course, some of those aren't open right now. But generally, it looks like it's pretty split between mobile phones and home computers. So a lot of what we'll talk about today is choosing that balance between um, targeting to those that do have more technology. They are able to log on at any time from home versus those who might have fewer resources at their tips. They might not have the latest computer, they might not have broadband at home, but they do have constant access and other factors there. So feel free to
Yes.
continue.
Also they're commenting here, Jeff, that basically a lot of them use their phones, but also tablets.
Okay, yeah, tablets too. I didn't even think about that, but tablets, and tablets can be connected, of course, to a home network or through mobile data as well. So tablets are a good median there. I don't have a tablet anymore. That's why I didn't think to add it to the poll. All right. So let's move on for now. Let's see. It always does this. There we go. So when I say access modalities, what do I mean? I mean the mode that people access their internet. We looked at the last poll there and saw most people had either mobile phones or some sort of home computer, home internet. But we saw a few who are having to go to a community hotspot or library if they're open, or sometimes the library parking lot or somewhere like that, or some using school internet or school hotspots. So, some things to keep in mind. First, one question we need to ask ourselves is, do all of our students have at least phone data? Do they have some access to the internet, or do they have no access whatsoever? In the poll, there was nobody who said they had no access. I think I saw it there, and then somebody changed their response to school internet. Um, but this is important. If we have students, especially if it's several students who have no access whatsoever, then that's something that we need to really try to remedy in some way through our institutions. Obviously, our institutions aren't going to be able to buy people computers and phones. Usually, sometimes they do, I guess. But w- what we need to do is make sure people know that, because we can't have online classes for someone who can absolutely never access online. In that case, you end up having to do different activities for that person that they would pick up at the school or something. So I'm glad it looks like nobody's dealing with that right now. But that's important to understand. Ask yourself that at the beginning, and see what needs to be done about anyone who's in kind of the worst situation there, where they're not able to access your resources. So if we have students who sort of have access at home or have access on their phones, maybe they don't have reliable internet, they can't access the internet, they can't access a course 24 hours a day anytime they want. Maybe they can't always come to a specific session, but they generally can get on at some point. If they have a Facebook, if they have an Instagram, we know at some point, some way they're getting online, and we really want to teach to the middle of that wherever our class is. Now, where I am now, I can mostly rely on everyone to have internet access at the synchronous time, and if people can't come to class, if they can't finish the assignments, it's not generally due to the internet. It's due to some other outside reason. So for me, it's kind of the higher end. It's quite reliable. But if your class median, the middle of it, is kind of lower, it's not totally reliable. That's kind of where we want to teach to, and meaning as we create our resources, as we create activities, as we find assignments that we're giving, we need to think in terms of what people are able to do with the median. But at the same time, we do want to accommodate those with the lowest access. So if we have students who are from a very rural area that doesn't have very good phone data, for example, or other places like that, we do want to keep that in mind and try to change the expectations so they can still achieve the outcomes, but in a different way that doesn't require as much internet access, as much resource and power. And we'll talk about some ways to do that. You can differentiate assignments by access options. I started to mention that there, but thinking in terms of what our students have access to, what resources they have, whether it's computers, their own, whether it's something in a school library or a community access point, or if they definitely only have their phones, we can change assignments, and we can take the same content and show it in different ways based on what our students can access. And that may mean changing something for the whole class, or it may mean offering up an option to someone else. And we can group according to access. So if maybe we have a class of 25 students, and you want them to work on a group project, it's okay to group them according to access. If you have 5 students who don't have the best access to technology or best access to reliable internet, it's okay to put them together and understand that when you assess their work, when you help them, when you teach them and guide them through the process, whatever they are working toward, that's okay. And if it's mixed proficiency, meaning if you have very high level speakers, readers, writers, with lower level speakers, readers, writers, that's okay. They're probably actually going to get more out of that. Particularly the lower level students are probably going to get something out of that that they wouldn't have before. So don't be afraid to think like that when you are assigning groups, when you're assigning projects. that it's okay to consider this and consider what the end product might look like. It might not be a fully beautifully produced video that's 3 minutes long and is cut in with the students and outside images and videos and popular music. But that doesn't mean they didn't work just as hard on it. It doesn't mean that they haven't accomplished the outcomes for the project that you do. So, just something to think about when you are assigning people into groups. And this is true for long, sort of summative projects, like I was sort of mentioning there. But it's also true for individual tasks, for assignments, even if you have breakout rooms and a synchronous class to keep them together that way. That's totally okay. So here's a fact of the day. You see here, this is actually my university, Pace University here in New York City. If you're wondering why I'm putting this up here, it's not because I want to show you the city or the university. It's to put it into context because I think it's important to understand that we've all been kind of in the same boat, as we say, an idiom there. We've all experienced the same things. So it says in March 2020, so a year ago this month, Pace University's English Language Institute, that's the department I work in. That's actually where I am right now. These books you see behind me belong to the ELI. We transitioned all classes to synchronous online classes. So hopefully those words make sense now. If you didn't know them before the webinar series, synchronous versus asynchronous. But we transitioned all of our classes very quickly to first we used uh, it was called Collaborate Ultra. It was a different kind of Hangouts, Zoom type thing, and then we switched over to Zoom, and that's what we did. We transitioned everything in overnight, basically overnight. But the instructors were semi prepared to transfer their in person instruction to remote synchronous learning. So it's not that we had not talked about it. We thought this might be coming a year ago. As you know, it was quite bad in New York a year ago. I'm sure you've all heard about what New York City was like then. So we had planned for this, but still, it was done overnight. No one really knew exactly what we were doing. All we had trained them in was how to start an online session and how to hold it, how to do breakout rooms, I think we did. And eventually we went to Zoom where we could do that. But the point is, we had no asynchronous learning components. Nothing was asynchronous, and our LMS was barely used. So I just feel like thinking about this and looking at this picture, you can probably imagine they felt the same way you probably felt, whether it was a year ago or a week ago. We've all been in the same situation here. And the point is taking little baby steps to move past it all. And so, with that said, I want to remind you of learning management systems. The best thing about learning management systems are number one, they give your course a home. So, as we talked about on Tuesday, it's a place where you can put resources, you can add structure, you can add organization. It's a place where you can centralize everything for you and the students. So, the reason I'm bringing this up again is because I know a lot of teachers who you just had to immediately adapt. And so that's why a lot of people are just teaching with WhatsApp or they're just teaching on Google Hangouts, for example. Some people are even teaching by email and sending out resources and getting emails back. And I really think that putting the time in to creating a learning management system class, a class shell or a class core, a course structure on there will really pay off for you in the end. They do work on mobile phones and computers. So if your students are accessing Hangouts or they're accessing WhatsApp, That way, then they will also be able to access these learning management systems. And probably the best thing about the learning management systems compared to these other means like WhatsApp or Hangouts, or if you're just using Zoom or Teams or something like that, is that you can easily copy from one term to another. So once you create your unit, you can copy it over. So if you look on the screen, you'll see three here that I've mentioned: Edmodo, Google Classroom, and Schoology. Um, all three of these, the reason I chose them to highlight today is because these are all free to you. You do not need to pay for it, and most importantly, your school or your university, your college, they do not need to subscribe to anything like for some of the other ones like Canvas or to some extent Moodle or Brightspace, like we use Blackboard. These are big companies that partner with universities and schools. But these three right here, they will allow you to go on and very quickly create a course. You can just create a course, put your course name, and begin building the units. If you do that, now you've created a place for the students to go, and it's sort of it lives there like your virtual classroom would be. It doesn't mean you have to stop doing things on WhatsApp. I really prefer to use both, but it does give a place for students to go. Now, pro tip, you can view Tuesday's webinar on the U.S. Embassy Panama YouTube page. For more info on setting up and using your LMS, we did a full hour on learning management systems. But tonight, I just really wanted to highlight the importance of learning management systems for students who have low access to internet, unreliable access. If you have few resources, these are few free resources that allow you to go in and create that structure without having to pay anything or do anything. Monica?
Hi, Jeff. Sorry to interrupt you, but as I was telling you yesterday, I think that's very important for me to communicate these comments. People in the chat are actually saying that students have very poor internet connections and that they are basically given their classes asynchronous through WhatsApp.
Mhm.
So just for everyone to know, I comment this already to Jeff yesterday, but I can see recurring comments in the comment section. So thank you very much.
No, that's good. And that's why, again, I would recommend using one of these. So, in the same way that you do it asynchronously on WhatsApp, the way you send resources, the way you send links, the way you send assignments on WhatsApp, you can add them on here. So there's a place where students can always go and access it from anywhere. Even if let's say a student doesn't have their phone gets stolen, something happens, they can still log in and access it. And the important thing is that it's free, and that even if you don't have the resources at your university or school, you can still go in and have a place to do it. And then that's why I point out number five. They Learning management systems allow you to easily copy from one term to another. I put it on there because just think if you could take everything that you've done this year or this semester or this term and just copy it over into another. It saves you hours and hours and hours of work next time around. Whereas when we just use these real-time resources like WhatsApp, we're always reacting. We're always just throwing things up there trying to get them out to the students, which is important, but it's something we have to keep repeating again and again each term. So I still recommend these. I think it's very important to have some sort of home for your course. So I would recommend looking at these three here. So next, let's talk about low bandwidth options. So you see here, I put kind of a I don't know, video to audio, audio to image, image to text, meaning um, uh, how we step down resources. So, video obviously would require the highest bandwidth, audio alone, kind of next. An image usually would be below audio, depends what it is, and then text. And so, there are some sites that allow you to differentiate your instruction, meaning to use the same content but in different ways. And so if you have if you have a course with students who some of them have very good reliable internet and they want to take advantage of that and they want a full multimodal experience, but in the same class you have students who don't have very good internet, you might look into this as an option, finding ways of giving different content or even different versions of the same content, but doing it in different modes that target the same outcome. So, for example, here, this is a video. We're not going to watch the video, but this is a video. It says about budget cuts. It's from Voice of America, which is site from the United States. And here we have a video, but let's say half of your class can't access video very reliably. They try to watch it, but it's just messed up. On the same web page, you can just listen to it. You can do it in audio through Voice of America, which takes out a lot of the bandwidth issues. So, whether you're putting these up on a learning management system or you're putting them up on WhatsApp or anywhere else, you can add different options there. Uh, I think most of my students, if I gave an option of video or audio, they would probably choose the video if they are able to. So I don't think there's an issue with putting both of them up. I don't think students are going to automatically choose the lower one here. But let's say you have other students who have very little access to the internet. Maybe they have one little bar of data on their phone that only connects once every hour or so. Then we have the text version as well, where they can still read the entire interview that is a part of this content or this resource. So this is just one example. I like Voice of America for this because they make it very simple by including the same content in three different forms. So this is from Voice of America Learning English. However, you can do the same thing by finding the same content, or let's say the same topic, but different, slightly different content or different sources. So maybe you have a YouTube video clip, like a long video explanation or something, and then you find something else on audio, maybe on a podcast player, or that's a little bit higher level, but not necessarily, depending what it is. But maybe you also find a similar article that people can access and read. And you can just put that right into your learning management system or into WhatsApp. Again, you'll find, at least I find, that students will go toward the more multimodal experience if you do this. So I don't think it's a negative to give these options, since the multimodal one is probably what we want them to do anyway. But it is good to add those options there for students if you need them. Okay. So we have another poll here based on a couple things that I've said here. We talked about learning management systems and how important they can be in making your class more sustainable, but also differentiating instruction. So, similar to questions we've had every day this week, is just kind of asking you how you feel about it. Does it scare you? Are you happy? Are you excited about it? Ooh, what are you thinking? So, do we have any comments from YouTube?
I just want to remind everyone that you can use the YouTube channel's comment section, and I will try my best to communicate your doubts or inquiries to Jeff. Well, here they're also repeating the same comments that they have very poor connections, but they are very excited about
Good,
teaching
good.
online, which is great.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And e- e- even with poor connections, if we, especially if we're doing asynchronous classes or a portion of our class is asynchronous, yeah, we're able to, we're still able to find those resources and put those resources up. And hopefully, depending on how much you need it, you are able to differentiate the sources that you use and that you choose and put up. Like I said, I don't usually have to go to a full text version of any source unless I'm specifically targeting reading. But some students may need that depending on where they are and what you're having to do. So anything else in the comments before we move on?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, good. So So differentiating assignments, of course, you can do that. Even on WhatsApp, you can do that in any way that you're communicating with students. You can do that even by email. But again, it's something that you can very clearly put onto a learning management. Some people in the comments mentioned Google Classroom being very friendly. So that's another reason for doing this. So you can say, high, medium, low bandwidth, something like that. And letting students choose what they want to do whenever they have access. Hopefully, they all have access to whatever your preferred one is, which for me is usually the multimodal one, usually the video. So, thank you for participating in the poll. We'll have more questions later, but it's always good to get feedback from all of you and see how you're feeling about the webinar and about the content. And as I've said before, it's totally fine if you're over here on the left side, you're scared, you're sad, you don't want to do it. Yeah, I understand. I understand. It's a lot of extra work that we don't always have time to do. So no one is going to fault you for that. All right, let's move on. So, oh, there we go. So next, I just wanted to touch very quickly, or not too quickly, but I do want to touch on teacher created curricula and sourcing. So I mentioned before, this is something I heard a lot of, not in the spring of last year, but when everyone went back to school in the fall, at least the fall here for the United States sort of academic year. We have spring, which is usually January to about May, and then we have fall, which is October to December generally, somewhere in there. So, March, April, May, teachers just did what they could. They took what they were doing in the classroom and tried to do it online, whether they were doing it on Zoom or they were doing it asynchronously, like Monica said a lot of you guys were doing. That's what they tried to do. But luckily, a lot of them still had this stuff. They still had their books, whatever they were using. A lot of them still had the resources from resource libraries at their schools or their universities, or maybe from the relo office, from the embassy. There are lots of resources out there. uh, but when they all came back in August after the summer, some of them taught in the summer as well, they did not have that. Now the teacher had it. The teacher might still have, whatever book they're using here. The teacher might have that, but the students didn't have them anymore. And for us, our students ended up going all over the world. I'm sure for most of you, your students were probably more local to where you were, but suddenly they weren't able to buy the same books or to access the same curriculum that you usually use to teach your classes. So this is where it came. where creating our own curricula and sourcing things came up because we suddenly didn't have the same structure we were used to. We couldn't rely on those books. We couldn't rely on those activities that maybe we've used for years and years. So I just wanted to give you a few tips on this. The first one, of course, just don't reinvent the wheel. We've heard that before about all sorts of things, but it's especially important here is that you have a lot of knowledge. You're a trained teacher. It's not just that you know English, but you also know how to teach because you've done it before. On day one, we saw more than 50% of the teachers on the webinar had been teaching for more than 10 years, right? Most of the others were teaching for 3 to 7 years. So you have a lot of knowledge. You've probably used a lot of books, a lot of resources. And even if you can't use that resource, even if you can't use that book because the students don't have it, you can still use those books as your guide. See the outcomes in there, see the objectives, see generally the order that's done for that level for those students so that you can use that as your own guide as you're planning your own course. So remember, you know your students' abilities and level more than anyone else. So even if the book that you would usually use is at a certain level or it has certain objectives that were always really difficult for your students, in this case, when you're sort of creating your own curricula and sourcing your own documents, you're able to use content and use sources that are more appropriate for your students, that are more appropriate for what their level is and what they're doing. So it doesn't mean that we can ignore what they're supposed to learn, especially if we have, for example, a government or Ministry of Education type of curricula, things that they're supposed to do. Sometimes they still have to pass a certain standard exam at the end of the term, as we talked about back on Monday. But we can suddenly do it in a more multimodal way. We can do it in a way that's more engaging to the students, that brings together all of the four skills. So, my number three tip here is to create lessons based on the four skills approach. So, it's important to remember that we don't have to copy everything that we've done in textbooks. If a textbook is heavy on fill in the blanks and sentence writing, we can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not one of these people who thinks we should do away with anything that's not entirely communicative, but we can supplement that with more communicative based activities. The way we do that is by thinking about the four skills. So for each outcome, for each objective, if it's a grammar point, let's say we're teaching present perfect and we're teaching how to create it, how to form it, and when to use it. I want to find video. I want to find maybe a music video that use it or that uses it. What is one I've used before? I've used what is it? Reba McEntire. Is There Life Out There is a video I've used before. Some country music for you. You probably won't know that. Most people probably won't know that. Um, so I'm gonna find a music video. I'm gonna find that's for the audio. I'm gonna find a reading that uses it a lot. I'm gonna have a writing activity and I'm gonna have some sort of speaking activity so that we're using all of the skills and that makes it communicative. So if you're not sure how to make something communicative, think in terms of those four skills, and then it helps you even when you don't have the resources that you're used to having, even if you don't have the technology that you're used to having. And finally, use a variety of sites here. There's, YouTube, there's Fluent U. There's americanenglish.state.gov. These are all good sites to use for sources for you to bring into your classroom. And then all you have to do rather than making the content is you just need to create something on the back end, create 5 questions about the video, or take the lyrics of the song and put in blanks for the song wherever the grammar point is, and see if they can figure out what grammar point is used there, where they're using the present perfect, for example. And then as you go through it, talk about why they're using the present perfect to continue on the same grammar example. The point is, use the resources that are available for you as a teacher, and you're the one who then synthesizes and filters all of that content for the students. And this is something you can do again without a lot of technology and without a lot of extra resources. We're only talking about using free resources that are freely available to you. So, I also want to talk about routine and flexibility because this is particularly important for students. Personally, I think this is important for students learning a language at all. I think learning languages can be very difficult for students, regardless of the level they're at, regardless of their age. It can be very difficult. But then we have that added layer of difficulty when they have issues with technology. They can't access the internet as reliably as they could before. They can't do these other things. So, one important question to ask, if you don't know where to start, if you're not sure where the students are going to go, is just to say, how much time would you have in class? So if you generally have class 3 times a week and you have class for 45 minutes each day, you can figure up exactly how much time that is, an hour and a half or whatever, a little more than that. So you can figure out how much time you would have, right? Then I would also say to figure out how much your typical homework would require. So if you've been teaching for 3 to 7 years, or let's say more than 3 years, as most people on the webinar had on Monday, then you know generally what your homework would be for a specific part in the book or a specific lesson or task that you would do. And what we need to do when we're planning asynchronous courses, which it sounds like a lot of you are having to do, but also if we're able to meet synchronously sometimes, we need to think, how much time do my students have? What should I put into this? And maybe, maybe I find that it comes to about 2 hours a week, or maybe it comes to about 3 hours a week, or maybe it's more. Hopefully it's more. That's even better. But it gives you a good place to start and say, okay, we used to meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 to 9:45. So that gives me 1, 2, 3, an hour and a half, 2 hours and 15 minutes, right? I hope I did that right. So that gives me that much time. And maybe I also had another 45 minutes worth of homework through the week. So it gives me 3 hours. So the routine is where we're bringing in that schedule. So if I know I have 3 hours of time each week, generally that's what I want my students working on English, even if we can't meet during that time. What do? I want to take that time and I want to divide it by the skills. I want to figure out how much time. It doesn't have to be equal, but maybe I want to do, an hour of speaking and listening, and I want to do a couple of hours of reading and writing. Or maybe I want to do an hour of speaking and listening where they're doing outside tasks, watching videos, and maybe I have them recording a presentation that they're going to put on the LMS that I just started on Google Classroom. Or maybe I also want to include some of my own content and videos during that time. So this becomes important when you're figuring out what we want the students to do for us. right? What we want them to produce, but also what we're giving them as resources. What's the foundation for that production? And we need to include both of them. We need to include both production and receptive skills, including our presentation. So if you think in terms of lesson planning, where you're preparing and presenting something to them, but they're also practicing and producing something, this is going to give us an idea for what we need to do. So use this as a guideline for how many resources to use as well. I don't want to say watch this 2 hour movie and then read this 5 page article, and then I want you to write a discussion board prompt, and then I want you to respond on WhatsApp and send a voice recording to your group, because you're going to end up with so much time that they're doing receptive skills then, for example, with a movie, like I said, that you're not getting them to actually do the task that they're supposed to be doing, the task that you wanted them to do. So keep this in mind. Remember, your class is usually one of several, and I only use three hours there as an example. Maybe you have 5 hours, maybe you have more, maybe you have less. All of them are different. Every class is different. I'd like to ask Monica what is most common there where you guys are. But I do think it's important to understand that usually our students are in our class, and they're also in math class, and they're in history class, and they have a science class, and they have all of these other things going on. So we don't want to overload them any more than we would if they were in class, because in many ways what they're doing now is more stressful, it's more difficult. So we want to both give them resources that will help them learn, but at the same time, on the flip side of it, we want to make sure that we're balancing that with their other obligations. So some last words about this, about routine and about flexibility, are: number one, this is kind of my tip here, some of my tips here. Number one, standing assignments. So what do I mean by standing assignments? So standing assignments means things that the students know they need to do every week or every meeting, or whatever your meeting pattern is, whatever schedule, whatever routine you set up. They know this is something they can do. So why does this have, or what does this have to do with limited technology, limited resources? The reason I put it in with limited resources is because generally students are able to access their learning management system, they're able to access the internet at some point during the week, for example. So we want to make sure they're aware of something to work on, something that they can do. So one thing I do is I find a task that repeats every week. So for example, I have news synopses. We've talked about this in this webinar series, where students need to go listen to a specific news podcast, and they listen to that, and they're going to have to give us a synopsis of that. So news synopses, the plural there. The Facebook groups, I mentioned that just yesterday. If you go back and look at that webinar, you'll see I talked about using Facebook groups in a way that the student can choose it. It adds student choice, as we say in standing assignments here. It adds student choice, but there's a back end task that they're supposed to do afterwards that's very general in my questions. Who is this for? What is this about? When was it started? Why does this interest you? But it gets the students sort of digging in more to the resource and finding more about it. There are vocabulary searches. We talked about those. If you remember Instagram, that Instagram Living Dictionary, and many presentations. These are just things that we've talked about during the webinar series here. But I also want to point out that it's important to have these, if you're going to have them, to try them as standing assignments, meaning every week you have to do this assignment. You have to choose a new news source. You have to find some new posts in the Facebook group. You have to watch this lecture or listen to this podcast or read something new and give me some production behind it. And that's important for limited resources because we want them to know exactly what to do when they are able to access the internet. Maybe they aren't going to have access on the day that we put it up on WhatsApp. Maybe it's 2 days before they're done, but they want to do something else. So they printed something out or they saved something, who knows what. But the point is that the students are choosing the task based on a framework and outline that you gave. So, some other ones I mentioned here summarize a video lecture. This is one that I do with my intermediate students, like B1, B2 level students. If you're familiar with CEFR guidelines, where they have to look up a video lecture. I give them a specific site through our university, but you can also use YouTube or Vimeo, and they have to summarize it. They have to tell me three specific points, the three new vocabulary words or phrases that they found, and where those are in the video, and basically what they found out about it. I don't tell them which video to use, that they have full choice to do, but I do give them the guidelines of what I want in the production. You can do the same with a podcast, listening. Earlier, I mentioned Voice of America Special English. That's something that you can give them and try to get something back. Reading as well. So, something else you might try doing for routine for standing assignments, if you are on an LMS, not Google Classroom, but you can do this on Schoology, on Edmodo, on most other university and school learning management systems, is setting up randomized quizzes. So, for example, I have 100 irregular verb questions. I have 100 preposition questions, and I have, I think, around 50 gerund infinitives, right? And this is my bank of questions that lives on the LMS. And each week, students have to go on, and it randomly, just the LMS randomly gives them 10 of those, of each, 10 of the verbs, 10 of the prepositions, 10 of the gerunds, infinitives. Everyone is a different quiz. They're free to use their books. They're free to look things up because they're going to anyway. But the point here is that we want them actually getting on and using them. And again, the reason why this is good for low resource students and in places where there's low technology, low internet access or reliability to internet access, is because it's something that lives there that they can always go do, regardless of the time that they are able to access the internet. They can get on there and try it. So, I've talked a lot about this. It's something I feel like is very important, the routine, but I also want to just mention the flexibility aspect. So, it is, of course, important to remain open and flexible with this. If you are in the situation where you have different levels of access, different levels of reliability of access, keeping in mind these things, adding as much routine to the class and to the course structure, particularly if it's asynchronous, it can make a big difference for those students so they don't feel so disconnected. Students can feel very disconnected when they don't know what to do. They feel like they don't constantly get the updates that the other students do. And so we want to give them tasks that they can always work on so they feel like they're progressing and they are progressing and they are practicing. But we also have to find the balance between understanding what the students are going through, but also students not wanting to do the tasks. So, I've taught high school students before. I understand there's some who just don't want to do it. They're not interested in it, and they're going to take any chance they can to not do something. I understand. So it's finding the balance there and what you're going to permit versus what you're not, and just being open and flexible to the point where you're allowing the students to do what needs to be done, those with lower access, without encouraging the other students who have full access to take advantage of that. So, if you will, we're going to have some question and answers. So, what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to type your questions in the chat, your final questions. We've got, oh, just 5 minutes. I thought we'd have a little more. Sorry. I'm just blabbing away today, huh? But what
Time
I'd
went
like you
very
to do,
fast.
yeah, very fast. I'd like you to go ahead and type your questions while I bring up the final poll. So that way we don't have the time kind of waiting for the questions to come in. So go ahead and do that. And then here's where our poll will be. Again, pollev.com/poll pace. If you already have your phone open or something, you can do it on there. But I specifically wanted to show you guys a different kind of poll, although I'm asking the same question. So here, which country are you joining us from? What we did the other day was we did a poll where I put the map up, and that was a poll similar in the poll types to what I use for the scale of how happy you are, like I used earlier. But this is one. It's called the donut poll, and you can put up various options. I put up all of the Relo Panama countries. I think I got them all. I hope so. And so that we can kind of see where people are in a different way. And I just wanted to show you guys what a different poll type looked like, because we were using kind of the same 3 or 4 poll types. I wanted to use a different one at this resource. I'm not sure if the resource you mentioned, Monica, yesterday, what was it? Menti, I think. I'm not sure
Yeah,
what.
Mentimeter.
Mentimeter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's basically the same thing. I've never used Cold Everywhere. I'm going to start using it to try it out. But Mentimeter is also very simple to use.
Okay.
And I think you forgot to include Ecuador. We have had a lot of people from Ecuador.
Okay. Nice.
Yes,
Yeah. I have
yeah.
been to
Your list of
Ecuador.
countries starts growing.
Yeah, it just gets bigger and bigger. So, of these countries, I have been to Ecuador and I've been to Panama, but that's all. So I need to go to all of the others once the pandemic is over.
I think that you will have now a lot of friends to come visit in Panama, and then you
Good,
should
I
come
hope so.
soon.
Yes.
The weather is very hot here. I don't know how the weather is there right now.
It's horrible right now. It's cool and it's rainy, and I they said it might even snow with the rain tonight. I don't know. So
We are in summer, so it's good here.
yeah.
We have a lot of people from Panama. That's excellent. We have people from Costa Rica, Colombia too,
Hmm.
and I've seen a lot of posts from people from Venezuela.
Okay, yeah.
So I think we have a lot of Venezuelans too here. Oh, you included that one. That's perfect.
Yeah, good, good. So this is just another way to visualize kind of the same information we had the other day, but I thought it would be good to put it up. Did we get any final questions in the comments before we go today?
Um, Actually, no, people were very receptive to today's workshop, but not very participative.
Yeah.
Um, that's a very difficult word for me. Everyone found your presentation very useful. You received a lot of emojis, and people were saying that they use Moodle, Schoology. I personally use Schoology, as I've told before. It's free, and I think it's super easy to use, very user friendly. I've tried Emoa before. I find it more a little bit more difficult,
Yeah.
but there are good elements out there, and you can check Dev's workshop. I think it was Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, it was Tuesday.
Yes, you can visit
And
Tuesday's workshop.
yeah, no, I don't want to harp too much on the LMS, but it's just it's the number one tip I can really give you if you're if you're in a place with low reliability, low resources, if you're just teaching on WhatsApp, it really will change your teaching life, just moving that off to another place so it can live there forever.
I have to totally agree with you on that one. And I like how you refer to LMS, that you give your courses at home. And
Right.
that's very, very good. I will steal that to explain it to my students too. Sometimes it's difficult for them to just like present an LMS at the beginning because they think it's too much. And I also want to point out that something that you said that is important too, that you have to organize it based either on content or weeks, but it has to be a little bit organized.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
definitely, number one tip that I am taking from the workshop and everyone should, it's to include an LMS to give home to our courses. I love that one.
yeah.
So before you close here, I want to say that thanks, everyone's thanking you for the webinar. I think you have a lot of fans here in this side of the world. And perfect, you put it
Yeah.
there. Please join our WhatsApp group, well, Jeff's WhatsApp group. Juan Carlos, who is behind scenes, has been sending you the little links for you to join. Also, the U.S. Embassy's channel. So please join the WhatsApp group. Juan Carlos has a very good form. He's here. He has a very robust form with a lot of materials that are free for everyone. So if you could join, he's going to be sending you the link to the form. So he like you can join his database and he will be sending you weekly tools. He's very invested in sharing, and I think you will enjoy that and take a lot of advantage of joining the list. So oh okay, yeah. So there's not a link. Let me try to share it before you leave. But you can just scan. Okay, I just copied the link and it's there in the YouTube channel. Okay, go ahead and copy paste it. If you could not scan the QR code, you can go ahead and do it. So we are going to close soon. Thank you very much, Jeff, for that another wonderful workshop. Tomorrow we are going to, well, not we, Jeff, is going to talk about a very interesting topic for everyone. That's get them talking. I have been working in this world of English for many years now. I think 12. And people always come to me and say, I want to speak, I want to talk, I want to express myself in English. And that's their number one goal. So I am really looking forward for tomorrow. I think everyone is. I know it's going to be Friday, and I hope everyone can join. And if you cannot, you can watch the video later. Please share the links. I know that's going to be a wonderful workshop tomorrow. So on behalf of Panama TESOL and the U.S. Embassy, I just want to say thank you and see you tomorrow. Okay. Thank you very much. Jeff, do you have
Thank you.
anything else to add?
No, that's all. Just feel free, like you said, to join the WhatsApp group. Feel free to connect with me on any of these networks. I'm open to talking with anyone, answering questions, no problem.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
well, I got something. I was able to share the WhatsApp joining link. So I just posted it in the chat room. So you just have to hit the link and yeah, you'll be connected.
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I see it there now. Good, good.
Okay.
So
Thank
Okay.
you.
join us,
So
join us. I sent a picture
that's excellent.
of my office yesterday. Maybe I'll send something today as well.
Your view. Green with MB here. Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, everyone. Please remember to join us tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be the last day. We're very sad about it, but very excited too. So thank you for being here. See you tomorrow. Thank you very much, Jeff, for everything. and all the inspiration that you're giving everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. See you.
Bye. Ciao.